I woke up with a start. I looked around and saw that nothing was wrong. I was still in my bedroom, and everything was dark. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but before I could lie back down, there was a crash, and then I heard glass breaking. I sat up. Suddenly, my breathing began to become ragged. My heart pounded against my chest. A burglar! There's a burglar in the house! Suddenly, I was regretting not buying into that security system that Fred tried to sell me last month. I tried to call the cops, but saw that my battery was dead. So, I had no choice. I picked up my baseball bat and slowly made my way down the stairs. I could see light coming from the kitchen. I realized that whoever it was had opened my fridge. I heard chomping and chewing. And suddenly, my heart stopped. A wolf! A wolf has broken into my house and is now eating my leftover meatloaf! And then, I realized I was living in a suburb next to the city, and the nearest forest was 100 miles away. Wolves don't break into houses, and they don't have any opposable thumbs to open fridge doors. Duh. I tried not to make a sound when I rounded the corner towards the kitchen where the sounds were coming from. When I saw what awaited me, I couldn't help but gasp. Hey there, I'm River. I ended up saving the royal family and the Prime Minister. This is how it happened. Think you have a unique title for a story? Comment it down below and like the ones you think are interesting. You never know, your story may be the next one we post. Alright, now, back to the story. The girl stared back at me in shock. Her eyes grew wide with fear and she dropped the plate she was eating out of. It shattered next to the remains of the vase that she must have broken when she stumbled through the darkness. My first thought was that I badly wanted to have that meatloaf in the morning. My second thought was, who are you? And what are you doing in my house? I leveled the baseball bat at her as a warning, but the initial shock had already left the girl's face. Instead of fear or guilt, she seemed somehow annoyed? I'm eating your food. Are you blind? Seriously, a baseball bat? You're gonna threaten a 5'4" petite girl with a baseball bat? I dropped the bat without knowing why, but somehow something told me she was not dangerous. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. I can't! Can't you see? I just escaped! They're gonna come looking for me. She held up her arms and sure enough, there were a pair of broken handcuffs on them. She really escaped from somewhere, that's for sure. Whether it was from prison or an asylum, it was hard to tell. I was about to ask her that when someone began pounding on my front door. Who would be knocking on people's doors in the middle of the night? I remember thinking. Don't get that! Please, don't get that! Suddenly, the fearless girl turned into a slinking puppy. Her eyes begged me not to open the door. I'm still gonna have to call the cops! The girl threw herself at my feet and hugged my legs so I couldn't move. No! Please, I'm begging you! Don't call the cops! Don't! The cops work for them! If you open that door, they're gonna take me away! But the knocking continued, and it was getting louder and louder. Somehow I managed to wriggle away from her. I opened the door and saw two towering men who looked... well, I can't describe it a different way. They looked evil. When I looked behind me, the girl was already gone. So sorry to bother you this late in the night, sir, but we're part of your neighborhood patrol. There have been reports of a strange girl breaking into people's houses. We received a tip that she went in this direction. Have you noticed anything strange tonight? Perhaps seen a girl who looks like this? One of the men showed me a photo, and it was definitely the girl who was chowing down on my food. I pretended as if I'd just gotten up. I yawned and rubbed my eyes. Oh, you just woke me up in the middle of the night. So far, that's the strangest thing I've seen tonight. So sorry about that. Apologies for disturbing you, sir. We'll get going now. I shut the door, but my heart was pounding. I was so sure they were gonna barge into my house. The thing was, I knew our neighborhood patrol. I knew them because they were my gardener's sons. And those two were definitely not Pablo and Hector. I watched them drive away through my window, and when I jumped around, the girl was there again. It made me jump. Sheesh! Can you not sneak around like that? The girl hugged me tight. What are you doing? Thank you. I told you they'd come looking for me. Those were my kidnappers. I'm Lila, by the way. Lila told me everything. She explained that she was the Prime Minister's daughter. That explained why I felt like she looked familiar. I'd actually seen her before in one of those charity dinners that my parents always invited me to. So when I learned that, I got kinda nervous. Having the Queen's cousin in my house in the middle of the night? That was kinda insane. She told me that the Queen and her husband have been dealing with troublesome noble families for a while. They discovered that many of the aristocratic families were corrupt, and they've been trying to slowly and silently take power away from these families. The Queen has been using her power and connections to take away important titles and roles from them to curtail those families' power and influence. Of course, those families did not like it at all. And when they threatened to rebel against the royal family, the Queen retaliated by threatening to expose those families and the evil deeds they were doing. That would bring ruin and scandal to them, and they would never survive it. So, to make sure that didn't happen, the aristocrats had Lila kidnapped. They were gonna use me as collateral, as leverage! Luckily, the people who were watching me fell asleep, and I escaped. And now I'm here. Well, I'm sorry. I broke your face. And the plate. And that I was inhaling your food earlier. It's just that I haven't had anything to eat for days. I forgave her for that, of course. I even took pity on her. I can only imagine how traumatizing it would be to go through all that. So I let her stay the night. I stayed up and took watch. I was still scared these two strange guys who would break into my house. The next morning, I called my dad. He was high up in society, so he must know the Prime Minister, or someone who works in his office. So I told him to pass a message for me. That evening, Mom and Dad came to visit me, looking worried. What have you gotten yourself into? I had no choice. I had to help her. We know, son, and we're glad you did the right thing, but these people are dangerous. We just don't want anything to happen to you. I know, Mom, but I'll be okay. I promise. Is she here? Is the Queen's cousin staying at your house? Yeah, but obviously no one else is supposed to know, so I'd appreciate it if you tell no one else. Of course. You will call me if anything happens, yes? I will, Dad. Alright. The Prime Minister sends you his thanks. And he told me he's begging you to let his daughter stay here. He can't have her extracted now. He says here is safer because nobody would suspect she's staying here. If they could kidnap her from her own room, they could do it again. Here? With me? He's doing this for your safety too. If they somehow found out that she's free and that she stayed here, they could come after you. Or our family. So, of course, I agreed. The trouble was, Lila was beautiful and charming, and she made me laugh. Spending all that time together made me fall for her, and she fell in love with me. That love bore us twins. It was a year later, just after the birth of my two boys, that things really went bad. The Queen was still cracking down on the corrupt aristocrats, and feeling cornered, they struck back. They used their power to spark a rebellion, and people began to riot. The aristocrats stormed the palace. But when they got there, the only people left in the palace were the ones painted on a canvas. It was thanks to my dad playing spy for the Prime Minister that we were able to know the aristocrats' plans. My dad used his influence, and with my mom's family connections, we were able to smuggle the entire royal family, the Prime Minister and his wife, and some of the people who work for their families out of the country. They dressed up as tourists, and the day before the riots, they joined the mass of tourists that were leaving after visiting the palace. My brother was in that group, and he led the royal family and their entourage to a train station where a train was waiting for them. By the time the aristocrats stormed the palace, the royal family were already safe in a neighboring country. As for the Prime Minister and his wife, Mom led them to my house. That was when they met their new grandsons for the first time. We worked tirelessly in secret. We gathered support. We rallied all the people who were still loyal to the crown, and with the help of Dad's network in the business world, sanctions were put on the rebellious families. Their assets were frozen, and within a few months, the rebellion was squashed. The Queen and her entire family were again free to come home. On the 5th anniversary of the royal family's return, the country held a celebration, and at the center of that celebration was a wedding. Mine and Lila's. We waited 5 years so our sons could be our ring bearers. The whole country watched and celebrated with us. The Queen was there with her family too. And as a wedding gift, the royal family gave me a knighthood and an estate so large, I could fit 40 football fields.